Hey guys, it's Matthew here once again, and I've got a project that I've been thinking about for quite a while that I've finally pulled off, and that is the Chieftain Blade Vortex character. For quite a while since, I don't know, probably a couple of years ago now, I've wanted to make a Blade Vortex that was fully fire converted, but the gear and the tools weren't really quite there yet because it was just a bit too awkward to make work nicely, so I thought I'd postpone it until, I don't know, a later date. And at this point, Chieftain got a nice solid rework, which made a build like this kind of just makes sense, or at least a lot more than it used to. And since Elementalist BV is quite the thing to do right now, I thought I'd try and explore another option of Blade Vortex just to give a bit more flexibility out there if you want to play Blade Vortex and don't just want to play another Elementalist. This version should be a lot tankier, and it's actually got some pretty satisfying sounds as well. So all of those pops, explosions, or bloofs rather, are coming from a Shaper mod on a Shaper stat stick, rather mace, that you can craft yourself that does a similar function to an Infernal Blow. It creates explosions based off of 5% of the mob's HP as fire damage. So the build is 100% fire damage through Avatar of Fire and the Chieftain conversion. It scales a lot of extra fire damage, and that means the pops will act sort of like an impulsor in that it will give you additional clear speed for the pops and for the explosions to help Blade Vortex clear just a little nicer. And on top of that, the Shaper Maces can have some extra fire damage, and then I've got a bunch of attack speed, and it functions rather similar to just a regular Blade Vortex, except you are completely non-crit, you are entirely on the left-hand side of the tree, getting a lot of extra strength, life, and regen, and then you are a Chieftain, which is ultimately a pretty defensive ascendancy too. So the character at this stage has like 6,500 life, haven't even really been trying too hard to get that much. It has quite a lot of damage, especially with Vaal Blade Vortex and Vaal Righteous Fire, and it should quite easily take on most content in this game and quite possibly even breeze through some Uber Elder runs. So thanks to all the additional gear that is now available for a build like this with Watcher's Eyes and Shaper items and Elder items, as well as that, the Chieftain rework, I think this could be quite a competitive Blade Vortex character to the Elementalist, where it still has quite a lot of viability in the speed, damage, and aesthetics, thanks to the explosions, the Shaper Mace, the Herald of Ash aesthetics, and overall could be a very solid competitor with that Elementalist Blade Vortex build. So you can see the clear speed is quite nice here. The playstyle, as always with Blade Vortex, has become a lot better thanks to the 10 maximum stacks, but the playstyle is just wind up a few Blade Vortex stacks and then dive around and explode everything. The single target at this point, it's currently level 87. This is the first piece of single target I managed to take on, a tier 8 Elder, because that's just the first one I've procced. The single target was pretty damn absurd. So we're looking at something like anywhere from 1 to 2 million single target Blade Vortex damage against Shaper level targets, with, depending on your gear, how expensive you go and how ironed out the character is. At my current stage, I'm probably sitting at about 1 million DPS, and you can see the tankiness is quite good there because the leech and the regen allowed me to just full-on face tank that degen beam without really worrying whatsoever. So the character becomes rather tanky while maintaining quite a lot of damage, and I think could well be a better version of a Blade Vortex character at this point, unless you want to go completely stupid damage, because I think Elementalist will still allow bigger damage numbers. However, this I think will just be a more well-rounded one. And then of course, like I said, add in your Vaal Blade Vortex and your Vaal RF, and you can see the kind of single target we pull out right there. So hopefully in the next few days I'll have much better single target examples in the end game, but this was just a quick little teaser, and I will show you what it took to make this character. So full fire conversion Blade Vortex is something I've wanted to do for quite a while, as I mentioned, but Blade Vortex these days with its area especially needs just a little bit more of an X factor, and that comes into place with like an Impulsors or an Elementalist Prolif explosions, But we now do have these maces that can do the enemies killed explode, dealing 5% of their life as fire damage. So that just helps it feel a little nicer for the explosions, the clear speed, and ultimately I think that's the only real reason I ended up starting a Chieftain, because I knew that I could get this mod and then scale it entirely around that. Once I POB'd the entire thing, it actually started to make quite a lot of sense, and the build ended up being fairly tanky while maintaining quite a lot of damage. So the character right now is level 87, he's leveled really fast as always, most things do these days, and the entire reason we're Chieftain is so that we can convert half of our damage into fire, half of our physical into fire, then gain some penetration, and then get a bunch of extra fire leech over here. You get covered in ash, which makes them take 20% damage, and then you get a bunch of regen and stupid bullshit over here, but you get 50% conversion there. You go Avatar of Fire, and all of a sudden our Blade Vortex is pure fire damage. So that means you scale all of your skills, all of your damage through pure fire. You get Elemental Overload, you get fire penetration, and you just get a bunch of leech from the ascendancy over here, which makes you pretty tanky. And you can scale a bit of extra damage through, let's say, Anger, Herald of Ash, the extra fire damage from the Shaper items, from the Elder item over here, and then also the Watcher's Eye. Now, basically, just about every Watcher's Eye is going to be pretty amazing for this character, as far as I can tell. A Fizz as extra fire, an extra fire damage one is really good as well. There's quite a lot of options, I think. Even the Leech one, if you really want to go that route. The Fire Pen route is really good too. There are quite a lot of options, and initially I wanted to do the conversion one, but it just made a bit more sense to grab Avatar of Fire and then have additional damage instead. So with all of this in tow, we do get something like 1,000,000 DPS charged up. And currently I'm running a Lore Weave. I managed to 6-link it in only 20 exalts worth of fusings, so like, 4,000 fusings or some shit. Lucky me. And the way I play Blade Vortex right now is by having Blade Vortex attached to Ink Area, faster casting, controlled destruction, added fire, and combustion. So combustion scaling our fire, added fire giving us a bunch of extra of that, although you can also use fire pen, controlled destruction, bunch of damage. But I'm running faster casting or echo just for clear speed, because it makes casting those blades feel really nice during the maps, and then increased area for your actual nice area. So those aren't good damage gems. As a matter of fact, they add nothing. So when you're ready, you put in Ele Focus and Conk Effect, and Ele Focus, of course, doesn't synergize with combustion because you need to be able to ignite things to get that minus fire res. So we also have Orb of Storms attached to Arcane Surge and Combustion. So the Orb of Storms is giving the minus fire resist, and then also the Arcane Surge, so you pop that whenever you're about to attack some shit, get your stacks up, and all of a sudden you are going to be destroying shit with your Ele Focus and your Conk Effect as well. The rest of the character's gear can be figured out pretty simply, fire damage, life, resist, whatever you can get. An amulet that has additional fire damage such as this one, and a bunch of dexterity, because it is pretty hard to get dexterity as a left-hand side of the tree character. An Elder Amulet is pretty damn good. Got ourselves a Mark of the Shaper for a bunch of extra spell damage. So then we crafted a Hysteria ring, just topaz, put Hysteria Essences, which is the extra physical as fire, until I hit anything. Currently I am supremely overcapped on fire, so fire resist is doing nothing at this point. And we just managed to balance our Wise Oak so that the lightning and cold is weaker but balanced, so that I'm getting defensive purposes for cold and lightning while offensive purposes for fire. So that does help against Uber Elder in the end, and it should make it pretty clean, I think, in the long term. Now besides that, I do have Fortify attached to Shield Charge and Leap Slam and faster attacks. So you charge around everywhere and then leap sometimes when you need to get over obstacles. In my mace, I have Blood Rage, Righteous Fire, and Increased Duration. So Vaal Righteous Fire just going to be popped for bosses, because we can definitely handle that bit of HP loss, and then tanking straight back up to full, and that gives like 50% more damage just about, so it's absolutely huge for our damage. And then my gloves over here have Clarity, Enlighten, Anger, and Herald of Ash. Now you probably won't be able to manage all of these auras for quite a while, so just running these two auras and some mana regen from your Arcane Surge does maintain enough to kind of bounce between packs. But mana is kind of a tricky one on this character, so get creative with what you need to do. Currently, I have these mana nodes here, these mana nodes here, and then these here. If you get some mana regen throughout your gear, throughout your tree, clarity as well, then it does become a bit more sustainable, though it's still a bit uncomfortable. You got to make sure you're popping Arcane Surge quite a lot of the time so that you actually get your mana regen. You do probably want some mana regen everywhere, but without Enlighten, it's going to be kind of difficult unless you get a Reservation Helm enchant, you know, Anger Reserve reduced, and ultimately you can run a Warlord's Mark on hit ring, which would pretty much sustain you always. I didn't want to go that expensive for my ring slot, so I just went one of these. And I do have a cast when damage taken, increased duration Warlord's Mark curse here, so sometimes when I'm taking damage I will throw out a Warlord's Mark and it will help me sustain mana. So mana is one of those things that's actually going to be a bit tricky. You can also run a mana flask if you want instead of the sulfur, for example, because the sulfur doesn't add too much damage or too much regen. It's just a kind of a nice last flask slot. On top of that, there's silver, wise oak, quicksilver, and a life flask. And there's really not too much else to say. That's more or less the guide for it. It is leveled by just going through, well, you've only got one way to go. I leveled with ethereal knives until Blade Vortex. It's going to be tough to level without some leveling gear because you need lots of dexterity, you're going to need lots of damage from your gear, and it's not going to be the easiest one in the world to level until you have that stuff. And then once you start picking up things like Namahu's Flame, you get a shitload of damage and you can start becoming full fire. In the end, we do have quite a lot of regen, quite a lot of leech, and it should be a very tanky build. And if you really want to max out the damage, you can go for the totem nodes and instead start running a Scorching Ray totem, which will add, you know, something like 30% damage over these nodes. But these are much more quality of life and should feel just a little better. You can make this build as tanky as you want or as strong as you want for damage. You can go far tankier than this with more endurance charges. You can definitely go a you know, pseudo 6-link Elder Helm, I believe it is, and then run a Combs if you really want. But I think this is a fairly nice setup with the Lore Weave, giving us the res, giving us the extra LE damage. I thought that worked pretty damn nicely. So ultimately, you can do quite a lot of flexible things with this. I'm just pitching you the idea of Chieftain Blade Vortex, so that gets you thinking that not only Elementalist is the way to go at the moment, and that's currently our path of building DPS over here, 1 million against Shaper, and there's still quite a bit of min-maxing to go, a few more gem levels, all of that. So I think our friend Uber Elder is going to be in quite a lot of trouble in the next few days, as well as the endgame maps and endgame Shaper, Tier 16 Guardians and all of that. I hope it's going to be completely smashing that content, and I do think it will. So look forward to the next few videos, and maybe Chieftain Blade Vortex could be the new meta in Blade Vortex. Who knows? Thank you very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video, and see you next time.